Thank you for joining us on Health Diary. My name is Gladys Gashanja, and today we're coming to you from the 4 Points by Sheraton here in Hallingham. Now, I am on record having had enough conversations around rare diseases, and one thing that always stands out is that there is such an importance to keep creating awareness around the same. Now, hereditary angioedema is one of those rare diseases, and it is often confused to be an allergic reaction because of the swelling associated with it. Today, we shed more light on HAE, which is how it is abbreviated, starting off with this fact of the matter. Hereditary angioedema, abbreviated as HAE, is a chronic rare disease characterized by recurrent episodes of severe swelling. The most common areas of the body to develop swelling are the limbs, face, intestinal tract, skin, and the airway. Hereditary angioedema can be fatal, especially when the swelling occurs in the throat area. Due to the symptoms mimicking allergic reactions, patients living with this condition face a lot of misdiagnosis. Though it is possible to manage the symptoms, hereditary angioedema greatly hampers a patient's quality of life. Hereditary angioedema sounds like a big word, but we're just about to break that down for you. And this we'll do with the help of Dr. Priya Bauri, who is an allergist, and Patricia Karani, who is living with hereditary angioedema. Thank you, ladies, for joining me on this conversation. Now, Priya, it is a disorder characterized by recurrent episodes of severe swelling. What causes this swelling?
So swelling in the body occurs for a number of different reasons. Fluid leaks out of the blood vessels into the tissues. And in hereditary angioedema, it is caused by a specific mediator called bradykinin. And it is released in an uncontrolled manner because of a deficiency or a dysfunctional enzyme in the body. But there are other forms of angioedema which are not related to this specific enzyme deficiency or dysfunction.
So, reiterate, what is the role of bradykinin?
So bradykinin causes the blood vessels to become leaky and release fluid into tissues. And that is where then you end up having these swellings of the body, including the face, the back of the throat. And of course, that is what is life-threatening. And that's what could be a medical emergency, which needs treatment.
So you are an allergist. I mean, what is the difference between swelling caused by allergy and swelling caused by HAE?
The mediator in allergic angioedema is histamine, and in HAE it's bradykinin. Different tests are done to identify what it is that's causing it, and different management, of course.
Okay, so Patricia, this condition is rare, and you clearly are one of the 50,000, which is the estimate they put out there. How did you get to find out you were living with it?
I realized that it runs in the family, from my father to my brothers and to me. And I also realized that it also was a problem with my grandmother, who is my dad's mother. So I think because of the severity of the condition and me trying to find out how to live a normal life and what it is and whether there is a cure for it, I went online actually to find out more about it. And also my brothers who were out of the country got diagnosed with it. So that is where I came to learn, oh, probably it's the same thing I have. And when here in Nairobi, when I got in touch with a doctor who was able to actually do the tests on me, the relevant tests, it came out positive.
Priya, this is most often than not, autoimmune diseases are hereditary. Would you classify HAE as an autoimmune?
It is not an autoimmune condition. It's actually a primary immunodeficiency.
And in the case of Patricia, clearly this is hereditary, as the name actually alludes to.
It is a genetic condition.
So are there not any other environmental factors or sort of an exposure that can lead to this condition?
There are triggers which will cause this uncontrolled swelling. For example, dental procedures, trauma, infections, stress, certain medications, and of course, menses.
All right, so Patricia, there are categories of HAE, type 1, type 2, type 3. What do you suffer from?
I'm a typical type 1.
And what does that mean?
That means that my C1 inhibitor, that is the enzyme she's talking about, is in low levels and it is also dysfunctional.
And what are these symptoms?
Spontaneous swelling. It's not a swelling where, for example, when you're hit by something, it swells just there. This one, it progresses, it moves, and it moves for like 5 days. Yeah, there's no itching, there's no rash, there's nothing.
So Priya, type 1 seems to be the most common, and now the rest of them, differentiate them.
Type 3, which is a normal C1 inhibitor level and function, and it is rarer, and it tends to affect women, though there are men who are affected by it as well. But type 1 is exactly as Patricia said, the levels of the C1 inhibitor are low. The second is where the levels may be normal or high, but they are absolutely dysfunctional. So the C1 inhibitor just doesn't work. Both type 1 and type 2 can affect women and men equally, and tend to come on in earlier life, in the first and second decade of life. The third type can come on later in life, so after the second decade or the second and third and beyond.
Mm-hmm. And are the symptoms similar?
The symptoms are the same. Progressive swelling that occurs sort of gradually and lasts many, many days, up to 5 to 7 days in some patients. And it can be painful if it is over joints or over the bones. It is not itchy. It tends not to occur with hives, hives or urticaria. But there is another typical rash which may come on before it, called Erythema Marginatum, and that is quite a specific rash that is quite easy to see. Some patients get diarrhea, abdominal pain, and get big swellings, very big swellings. One can get groin swelling, so swelling in the scrotal area and the genitalia. And again, this can be very uncomfortable and painful for the patients.
Okay, so Patricia, they say the symptoms of HAE typically appear when you're younger, in your childhood days. Do you remember this happening when you were younger?
Oh yes, I do. I remember, I think I was about 8 years old, and my normal nature was I was a very, I would say boyish, because I loved games and I loved running and I loved climbing trees. So I found myself one day being hit by the edge of a window in the house, at the back of the house. And that swelling was on my forehead. And it did not just swell at that localized area, it spread like over my face, a bit on my eyes. Of course, it didn't get severe at that time.
They say it gets worse when you get into puberty.
Yes.
Was that typical in your case?
Yes, it was very typical, because I remember in my primary school years, I would still do my activities like running. I loved running. I was a very good runner, 100 meters sprint. But when I got into my high school, I was not able to continue with my sports, because then the episodes became more frequent. And based on now what I know now is that it was based on the hormonal, when you become now an adolescent, your menses and everything. So it became worse, it became more frequent.
Priya, explain the hormones and HAE.
I don't have a huge amount of science behind that, I'm afraid, but I think it is related to the hormonal stress that the body undergoes. And the similar thing would be with pregnancy and, during delivery and all of those different things, the stress, the trauma.
Okay, so Patricia, when your body swells, which organs are affected mostly in your case?
I cannot say which ones are mostly affected, because I've literally gotten swollen like every part of me.
And we mean?
We mean internally on my throat, on my back, on my face, on my eyes, on my lips, on my hands, on my chest, In my stomach.
Wow.
I mean, we can go all the way down. There's no part of me that I don't know which has not gotten swollen.
Okay, so Priya, when it comes to the type or the organ that swells, is this different with every patient?
The swelling can occur anywhere on the body at any time for any patient. Some patients do say that they have more common swellings in certain areas. There are signs that this could be starting to come on just from the history of what the patient has told us. But again, you cannot tell, we cannot predict, and that's part of the problem here. You can't predict your next swell. So what we want is for our patients to be identified so that we can help them be on the correct preventative treatment, especially if they are the kind of patient with HAE who has frequent swelling or the life-threatening ones.
All right, and now that we're talking about life-threatening, this condition is potentially fatal. When we come back, Patricia will tell us how bad it gets. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Health Diary. My name is Gladys Gashanja. The conversation, hereditary angioedema, it is abbreviated as HAE, still with Dr. Priya Bowery, allergist, and Patricia Karani living with this condition. And before we went to break, Priya mentioned triggers. For you, Patricia, which are they?
Back then, it was when, because I told you I was very active, so anytime I did too much running or too much standing, that was a trigger for a swelling. So with time, I've learned how to avoid these triggers, but currently right now, my triggers are estrogen levels. So anytime just before my periods or after my periods, I'm having a swelling somewhere, okay? And of course, stress and pressure. That is another trigger that I have.
So explain this. When you get stressed, a part of your body swells?
Yes, if it is excessive stress, the one that I'm not able to cope with.
Okay. When you think about your symptoms, the triggers also, and compare them to your family members, are they similar?
Really, I think my brothers, they swell because of physical activity. And I think another brother of mine swells because of stress as well. So they're not the same.
So how bad do these swellings get?
So these swellings can get really bad. First of all, I learned that that's what killed my grandmother. And for me, I've also gotten to very many points where I'm being rushed to hospital because I can't breathe. Okay, so those incidences, I can't even mention how many times that has happened, to the point whereby I think the one that really scared me most is either I passed out or I got into a semi-comatose or something.
And every time that happens, you have to go to hospital?
Well, I used to go to hospital, Gladys, but I stopped going because when I go to hospital, I don't get the relief. I mean, it still becomes fully blown. We're going to leave a lot of money in the hospital. My family was financially crushed. We went to the point whereby we're even leaving title deeds. You understand? So it reached a point where I stopped going to hospital. I said, if my dad fights this at home, I'm also going to try and fight it at home.
Priya, stress and HAE, what's the connection?
When you're under stress, the body responds in different ways. Stress is a trigger for allergies. Stress can make autoimmune diseases worse. Stress is something that the body simply can overwhelm the body and the immune system in different ways.
Do the symptoms of HAE get worse or better with age?
Variable, because some patients will tell you that they increased over time and became more severe over time. Others will tell you that their symptoms remain the same, and some will say that they used to have more frequent life-threatening reactions that are occurring less frequently, as in Patricia's case.
So HAE and swelling, those go hand in hand, and most health practitioners would perhaps think it's an allergic reaction. This has been your life story. What is your experience?
What I went through was a lot of misdiagnosis. Of course, I was told the first thing they used to find out was whether somebody has beaten me up, or if I'm pregnant, or or if I have typhoid. I've been, you know, even underdiagnosed as well, because Gladys, I also have allergies. So I'm very allergic to dust and mold and cold weather. Okay, so there was a very thin line to know whether what is what. So most of the time I was given allergic medications every time I went to hospital. But I think the thing that they couldn't go beyond was, why aren't I responding to the antihistamines? I think they didn't go beyond that explanation, because I would respond just a little bit, but it would still get fully blown. Like I would still get, when I say fully blown, means that the swelling has gone to the extent that there's no more room to swell.
So Priya, even allergists have been, fooled by the similar symptoms that we're talking about. So how is the treatment method different, and what made you know the difference between those two conditions?
The first thing is, of course, we need to educate practitioners about the difference between the two. When a patient comes in with a history of swellings but no hives, you want to start thinking about why. And when you take a good history as a doctor, or the patient tells you that they have a family history of swelling with no hives again, and these are more painful swellings, and people may have died in their family because of swellings. These are all markers that from the history, even without doing any fancy tests, a good history can lead the doctor to a possible differential diagnosis that this could be HAE, especially if the patient is not responding to treatment for allergies. So what we need to do is not be too quick to diagnose, but we need to have an open mind and work our way systematically through all the different causes of swellings, and then come down to narrowing it down.
So would you say perhaps, because Patricia says she's never met anyone else with this condition, that there are people living with this condition and do not know?
Absolutely. There are patients out there in Kenya who have HAE but either know about it and have not come forward, or who don't know they have it and are living with it and hiding behind mismanagement.
Okay, so Patricia, HAE clearly has an impact not only on your social life but also your career, because I'm thinking the constant swellings can actually, be such an impediment. How have you coped?
Like in my school life, every time when we were just about to have exams, I would get a swelling. So that would mean that just before the exams, either I missed some exams, or the school now has to, reschedule exams for me. When it came to my work life, every Monday, after a nice weekend, every Monday now the pressure comes in, oh, I have targets to meet and everything. So every Monday at times at work I was unwell. And, I remember at one time, they used to wonder, did she have such a really, fancy weekend that she can't wake up on Monday morning? Why Monday morning? So that affected my work life. And of course, my social life. Like, I remember I was never free to go out with my friends. Like, they want to go hiking, they want to go biking, they want to go for, camps, places where you have to, camps you sleep on the ground. Yeah. So that pressure of pressing my body in a place which is not comfortable would bring about swelling. So that made me to be, a more conservative person, a more hidden person. I didn't want to come out to face my friends when I'm swollen, because first of all, it's not something, when your face is all swollen up to maximum, everybody runs away from you, of course. And even the people who are close to me, like my family, go like, there was always that seeing somebody getting overwhelmed with what they have seen, like you're a monster. And I also remember, just funny incidences where I never used to look at myself in the window or even on a mirror. I would make sure that if I'm swollen, I avoid the mirror because I don't want to scare myself as well. First of all, you need to not be in denial. So I stopped being in denial because there was always this thing of, you need to pray, you know, you can get healed, and this is something that the devil has brought about, and you know, it's like a curse. So I always used to feel like this thing can go away, but it's not the case. You accept the condition and say, okay, this is with me. And only when you accept and be able to get an avenue to talk about it, that is when I realized I was able to actually manage it.
Okay, so Priya, having walked with Patricia, what would you suggest would be the best coping mechanism?
The first is, as Patricia said, is to embrace it, and acceptance is key. Learn what it is that brings on your triggers, or what are the triggering factors, and manage them. Once you understand your disease and your condition, compliance with medication and understanding your medication well and having a good relationship with your clinician and your doctor is very important, because they will help you along the way. Monitoring your symptoms so that when things are getting out of control, when you are not responding to treatment, when things are not right, you are able to identify and communicate with your clinician. And last but not least is managing stress and really engaging with your family. I think family and friends support, and a support network around you who understands your condition and who's willing to support you during difficult times is also something that really helps my patients.
And you mentioned having to put title deeds in hospital because of how expensive it got. Are we saying because it's a rare disease, this is not recognized by insurance companies?
It's actually not covered by the National Health Scheme. So even the medications that I buy, they're not covered. So it has to be out of pocket. And so we're really struggling to try and, you know, raise awareness about ensuring that these rare conditions are included in the health scheme for us to be able to afford. That is me who can be able to buy a tablet. What about somebody else?
Good question. And you have not found somebody in Kenya who lives with this condition, but you do a lot of advocacy beyond the borders. Have you met others who live this reality?
Oh yes, I've really met very many people. And you know, what really strikes me is that the African continent has very little numbers. But when you go to the Western world, they're in thousands. So, you know, it baffles me, and you know, that is, and one of the things that I realized was that there's actually lack of knowledge amongst the physicians. So I've made it a passion that physicians such as Dr. Priya, who have, you know, who want to go an extra mile, I capture them. And we do these trainings in their countries. And you know, we always get this overwhelming response like, oh my God, probably I have met a patient or two, or I underdiagnosed. They say it themselves.
All right, Priya, even as we bring this to a close, talk about the importance of perhaps research and data that would support the existence of rare diseases such as HAE.
We need to understand local disease. Our patients may have slightly different patterns to the Western world. We may have slightly different numbers. We need to understand, and until we are ready to look for patients, identify patients, bring them together in a registry so that we can collect information. And it's only through research and data collection that we are going to be able to fight government to actually to bring treatment in, to change the national health funding so that we can actually support patients with rare diseases and non-communicable diseases. This is really important.
All right, Dr. Priya Bowery, allergist, and of course Patricia Karani, living with hereditary angioedema. See how it took a while there. HAE is what we're going to call it. And thank you for this kind of awareness. It is really critical. Time now for the health tip.
So this is how a tooth looks like. This is the gum, and this is the crown of the tooth. So if you cut the tooth into two, this is how the tooth will look like. So we have the outer layer, which is called the enamel. We have the middle layer, which is called the dentin, and the inner layer, which is called the pulp. So the outer layer, the enamel, is usually not living, so therefore it doesn't feel pain or anything. The middle layer has some fibers, and therefore it's able to feel sensitivity. But the inner layer is the living part of the tooth, which has blood vessels, the nerves. Now, when you have a cavity or a hole, which is in the outer layer or part of the middle layer, that is when you are able to do a filling. But now when the cavity goes all the way and reaches the nerve, then you start feeling pain, and that's when you do a root canal treatment.
Remember, just because it's rare does not mean it does not exist. Hereditary angioedema was our conversation. Thank you for your engagement on our social media platforms. My name is Gladys Gashanja, coming to you from the 4 Points by Sheraton here in Hurlingham. Until next time, see you.